Thank you for joining me today. And again, apologies for the technical difficulties. But here's where we are right now. With over 60% of organizations being stuck in the pilot purgatory, running AI experiments that never make it to production, never deliver measurable value despite the billions in global investment. According to MIT's 2025 report, only 5% of pilots successfully integrate and drive real business impact. The difference between success and failure isn't the technology, it is whether an organization is ready for AI. So for today's session, our agenda is what's actually changing in the regulatory risk and landscape, the foundational work that needs to be done before investing in AI tools, and what practical next steps you can take tomorrow. My goal will be to leave you with clarity and give you some concrete steps you can bring back to your teams, and let's get started. As you probably, some of you know, Bill C-27, the proposed federal AI legislation, died before the 2025 election. Right now, Canada has no binding federal AI act. In that gap, regulators are enforcing soft law instruments. In 2025, the conversation focused on emergence of disciplined regulatory governance frameworks. Let me walk you through some of the regulatory shifts that emerged since the last webinar in October. At the federal level, now the OPC has elevated AI and Gen AI investigations to its top strategic priority for 2026, focusing on consent, cross-border data flows, and algorithmic bias. At the provincial level, BC Office of Information and Privacy Commissioner flagged AI as a core privacy pressure and officially called for PIPA modernization. Insurance Council of BC began promoting CISRO's cybersecurity guidance as a professional conduct requirement and making this a regulatory requirement. Here is what this means for organizations considering moving forward with AI implementations. The rules exist, but they're not just in a single federal AI act. They are distributed across various regulators who are actively enforcing them. So we covered so far what's changing in the regulatory risk and landscape, but now let's talk about what matters before making any investment decisions, because that's where a lot of the organizations are struggling. For organizations seeking long-term gains and structural change, the first conversation should be always about AI readiness. Organizations that fail to establish that essentials often see their AI projects fail, and let me walk you through them. The number one is data readiness. Those who are more involved with AI, they will probably know AI is only effective as the data we put into it. And I like to use that analogy quite often. Think like your data like a school binder. If the binder is messy and it's missing pages, if you are having notes from 10th grade, but you're at grade 12, even the smartest student cannot succeed. So in terms of that, what does data readiness actually mean? Organizations need quality standards like accuracy, completeness, consistency, and timeliness. These are non-negotiable to avoid. Otherwise, it is garbage in and garbage out, and scenarios where produces unreliable outputs, unfortunately. And the other part is legacy systems. They must be either bridged or modernized. And fragmented data remains as one of the primary barriers to successful AI implementations, unfortunately. And I kind of feel like we don't have to make this that complicated. For solo advisors and small teams, this might mean establishing a single source of truth. For example, having only one single master client spreadsheet instead of 3. Naming documents clearly so that unused versions wouldn't be accessed. For larger organizations, of course, it is a much bigger project. The data should be findable, accessible, and reusable. For example, automating data quality at the source, preventing data chaos before it enters the system. Unfortunately, poor data causes AI projects to fail at a twice rate of the traditional IT initiatives. Data readiness is not optional for any size of insurance organization aiming to move beyond the experimental phase. How about executive leadership and governance? That's another crucial reason why these AI projects fail, because they lack business line support, which means executive leadership alignment is a must. management alignment serves two critical functions. First of all, it defines exactly what success looks like and why AI matters for their business. And secondly, it creates the governance structure to operationalize that vision safely while managing regulatory risk. So let me walk you through how this might look. Successful AI adoption requires leadership to replace vague experimentation statements with clear business strategy, linking AI directly to measurable outcomes. This can be reduced submission times, increased underwriter capacity. This vision is operationalized through cross-functional governance structure, including legal compliance teams to define the risk appetite and ensure accountability. To protect the clients and the organizations, the leadership must enforce AI use policies that prohibits client data in public models, mandating human-in-the-loop checkpoints for high-risk decisions. Because 70% scaling failures stem from human and organizational factors rather than technical ones, leaders must prioritize reimagining the workforce, and that is crucial. Training must be phased progression, moving from foundational literacy to the independent judgment required to stress test AI's outputs. There is a side note I would like to share. Participants who are attending today's session from brokerages. This is important because in December 2025, IBAC released broker-specific AI governance guidance that provides practical template for these policies. So if you're a brokerage wanting to know more about it, please feel free to visit IBAC's website. How about strategic use case prioritization? To avoid the trap of pilot purgatory, organizations should use a disciplined scoring metrics, evaluating impact, alignment, feasibility, risk, time to value, and basically prioritize high-value opportunities over resource drains. And of course, success also depends on focusing resources on 1 to 2 low complexity quick wins that deliver measurable ROI within 3 to 6 months and building momentum towards on top of that. By defining concrete success metrics upfront and starting where volume is high, firms ensure that AI initiatives hit the strategic targets. For example, submission triage for an MGA might be a higher priority than consumer-facing chatbots because it is lower risk. First of all, it's internal, and it can immediately reduce the bottlenecks. How about avoiding common implementation pitfalls? When we look into technology first thinking, and by the way, beyond the foundational requirements of data readiness, leadership alignment, and strategic prioritization, AI projects often derail due to technology first thinking, because this is where the hype-driven tool selection precedes a clear definition of the business problem. To succeed, organizations must start with defined business outcomes, quantified baselines, tracking metrics like transaction time and error rates while reimagining entire value chains. For example, the quote to bind process, rather than focusing on isolated tasks. When it comes to ignoring change management, since 70% of AI implementation failures stem from organizational and human factors rather than technical limitations, technical excellence alone cannot secure ROI, unfortunately. Success depends on leadership visibility, championing the strategic why, reframing AI as a capacity multiplier, and augments human expertise rather than a job replacement. For smaller practices, this might be as simple as weekly check-ins. For larger organizations, this might mean formal training programs, ongoing support, and regular reviews where staff provide feedback on AI performance. The integration and workflow gap. Deploying AI as a standalone tool rather than embedding into core systems like agency management systems or customer relations management systems creates this measurement gap, unfortunately, and it prevents them being tracked with KPIs or reflected in profit and loss. So this fragmentation makes it impossible for leadership to demonstrate the value of AI and the return on investment, but also leaves regulatory auditors unable to trace the decision trails required by OSFI's FISC guideline E23. To avoid this gap, organizations must move beyond use case trap of isolated pilots quickly as possible and build AI inside existing reporting workflows to ensure every automated action contributes to a single strategic source of truth. Unfortunately, deploying AI without assessing OPCs, principles, cross-border processing, data processing, addendum requirements, that also creates compliance gap for shadow AI. And for those who don't know, shadow AI is staff using confidential company and personal information into unapproved public AI tools to speed up their work. To minimize this compliance risk, and it's a big compliance risk, organizations must implement governance policies prohibiting public AI use with client information and provide secure business-grade alternatives that maintain audit trails with safeguards. So here is the quick recap of what we covered today. Canadian regulatory landscape has shifted from exploration to disciplined governance with the finalization of OSFI's guideline on E23. New provincial regulations signaling that early adopters must act now rather than wait for federal legislation. Primary risks are human and organizational, ranging from shadow AI to pilot purgatory, and firms must secure these three prereqs, like the data readiness, leadership alignment, and strategic prioritization before investing in tools. So if you want to succeed, if organizations are really seriously thinking about AI implementations, they have to take these three actions. Assess the readiness, prove value through measurable cycle time and accuracy gains, and protect trust by implementing human-in-the-loop safeguards that align with current regulatory bodies and privacy commissioners' guidance. So if you're establishing these foundations, you will be positioned to implement AI responsibly while maintaining compliance and trust. So we completed the first part of the webinar. Before we move on to the demo, I'd like to point out two quick things. The first one will be I'm offering a complimentary 90-minute AI fundamental session to one organization who's interested in exploring AI. We will cover how large language models work and establish foundational concepts. The session can be delivered online or in person. Please feel free to email me if you're interested in that. And secondly, now you understand why AI readiness is such an important thing before even thinking about implementing AI into your business. If you go to my website, there is a free AI readiness assessment tool. If you scroll down on my homepage, just below the services section, this is not a formal audit. The formal audit is a multi-week service. But if you want to have a rough baseline, please feel free to visit the website and take the readiness assessment. Now, I would like to stop sharing or perhaps I'm just going to close this. I'm hoping that you're seeing my screen. I'm just going to go here. Perfect. Okay. My apologies. Okay, so for today's session, I'd like to show you a simple but a powerful workflow designed to make life easier for financial advisors. Specifically, it helps to streamline the quote analysis. It's a tedious process of copy and paste to create the illustrations and reviewing them for a prospect. So we will walk through how a custom Chrome extension and Power Automate on Microsoft environment can work together to handle the data entry, quote review, and even generate a simple comparison summary from two different insurers, which are Equitable and CPP. And okay. I hope you're able to see me are you able to see my little image on the bottom? I'm hoping that I'm able to show you everything as I'm supposed to. Okay, perfect. So I can see the screenshot. Okay, so let's come here. I created this little prospect master sheet. Of course, this is not as complicated as yours. It basically outlines some of the basic things like the prospect ID, the prospect's information, what kind of life coverage that they're requesting. And I only decided to focus on term 20 and term 20 with critical illness 75 because they are, I believe, some of the most commonly submitted requests for illustrations. So now what we will do, we will quickly come here and select, one prospect. So I think I'm going to go with, okay, let's go with Priya. The name Priya, it sounds beautiful. Perfect. So now we are on CPP Access. This is the Chrome extension that I built. As you can see, there is a little green check mark in here. And the little green check mark is also on the illustration for the Equitable Life, but you don't see that in action in other platforms. This is how I designed the extension. So now I'm going to be putting Priya's information. I will paste the data from Excel and I'll basically click on validate data. So now extension knows what I'm putting in here is something that it can transfer to the insurer's platform. And I'm clicking and I'm not touching anything. If you're not able to see me on the bottom section of the screen, my cursor is not moving. As you can see, as the extension is filling, and this is how I designed it, just so we can see, it doesn't have to be too fast. We can definitely, if you're interested in, enter the data quicker, but just to mimic the human typing, of course, human typing will be slower than that. But so now it generated the PDF form for me, the illustration, and you can see the name it named accordingly. And this is a huge time saver. I'm so sorry. I think I have one person who wants to join us. Yeah, perfect. Okay. Yeah, so now as you can see, it generated the PDF for us. And now what we're doing, we are incorporating this human in the loop and saving this PDF into a designated location on Microsoft's SharePoint. Okay, perfect. Now I don't need the CPP anymore. So what's going to happen now? This is where the magic will happen. That's where the trained AI model on Microsoft environment, where we are still keeping the data in Canada Central, we'll extract everything from the PDF and we'll add everything onto this table, quote table, including the client age, the gender, as you can see, the smoker status. So I want you to see how it will generate, but I also want you to see in here how the Microsoft is processing the flow as we speak. So in a second, where's my Excel sheet? Now we will see Priya's information in here. Perfect. Now we have everything easily extracted from the PDF, including the total monthly premium, annual premium, like anything that we can think of. If we would have a critical illness, it would have generated here, and including the file name. So now let's do the same thing for the equitable. By the way, oh, I don't know, maybe it popped up something in here. What the automation did, it sent us a quick email informing us that there has been some activity, and now this code has been processed and safely added to our list where we actually extracted all the information. So now let's go to the Equitable Life. And again, I will do the same thing, the form, and I'm not moving my cursor. It is filling out the form for me. And as you can imagine, this application is such a small application. Can you imagine if you are putting this information to, let's say, Canada Life with quite the detailed policy, like when you're placing the policy? It's a huge time saver. What we did in here with the extension automatically saved the file for me. So we have that capability to have the extension to save either by itself or by us with the human in the loop. And of course, the human in the loop is what we want. We have the technical capabilities to do that with the technology, but it is, first of all, not compliant. Secondly, it's like the snowball effect. If something is wrong, because what the financial advisor has to do after everything is extracted, they need to go through and make sure the information that is gathered is correct. So now the automation is running. Now, I would say in 30 seconds or so, I'm just going to put this in here. Perfect. Now Equitable Life field basically came here. Now we have these two comparisons from CPP and Equitable Life for PREA. And now what will happen? Now AI will get involved and it will give us some insights. So as you can see, the first email we received, it was proving that quote was received. But the second one that we're receiving right now, it's the quote comparison report. You know, this section where you see the personal information, some of the personal information is not being shared with AI. AI basically does the comparison analysis for us, providing insights for advisors, the executive summary, premium comparison, coverage comparison, underwriting, provides some recommendations for us and giving us some questions that we can potentially ask to that prospect. But this section, this AI comparison analysis, doesn't have PREA's personal data. It only sees that's a female, her age, whether she's a smoker and non-smoker, and the details of the difference between the CPP and Equitable Life illustrations, their quotes. So this is pretty much, I don't know, like I should ask advisors in here. I don't know how long it takes the full workflow to do manually. Maybe 30 minutes, 20 minutes per quote. But as you can see, we completed all of that step, easily, quickly. I would say so. What you can do with that time, you can assist more clients. You can actually try to bring in more business. People need help, especially there are some sad events and some happy events. If you would like to leave any feedback and want to try this for your own processes, I'll be happy to connect. Take care and have a lovely day. Bye.